The European Central Bank is reportedly preparing banks for a possible Russian-sponsored cyber attack as the region braces for the financial fallout of the ongoing conflict in Ukraine. Earlier this week, French President Emmanuel Macron shuttled from Moscow to Kiev in a bid to act as a mediator. Now the European Central Bank, led by former French Minister Christine Lagarde, and which has oversight of Europe's biggest leaders, is on alert for the threat of cyber attacks on banks launched from Russia. Russia released a video showing the S-400 air defense system being deployed at a training ground in the Brest region of Belarus. According to the ministry, this comes as part of final preparations for the start of the large-scale military exercises. Russia and Belarus are to start joint exercises called the Allied Resolve 2022 on February 10th, which are aimed to repel an attack on the southern borders. Western countries say that they fear a Russian invasion of Ukraine as it has now amassed more than 100,000 troops on the Ukrainian border and deployed 30,000 more in Belarus for these joint drills. Lithuania's foreign minister has said that countries needed to strengthen ties and regulations to counteract disruptors Russia and China. China has downgraded diplomatic ties with Lithuania and pressurized multinationals to sever all links with the Baltic state after it allowed Taiwan to open a de facto embassy in Vilnius. The European Union launched a challenge at the Geneva-based trade body last month, accusing China of discriminatory trade practices against Lithuania that it says threaten the integrity of the EU's single market. The busiest land crossing from the United States to Canada remains shut after Canadian truckers blocked lanes on Monday to protest Canada's pandemic control measures. Canadian police also said that another border crossing had also been shut down by protesters. According to the Windsor police, while traffic in both directions was initially blocked, the US-bound lanes have since reopened. Truckers have now been demanding an end to federal COVID-19 vaccine mandates for cross-border traffic from January this year. Salah Abdeslam, the lone member to be captured alive by the police, will be cross-examined in court today for carrying out the terror attacks that killed 130 and injured many more people. 20 people in all are on trial in Paris over their suspected involvement in one of the deadliest attacks ever seen in France on November 2015. The trial began in September of 2020 in an especially designed courtroom at Paris's historical Palace of Justice, and is one of the most complex, closely followed cases in modern French history. The University of California has agreed to pay $243.6 million to settle allegations that hundreds of women were sexually abused by a former UCLA gynecologist. The settlement was reached with the assistance of a private mediator after substantial litigation. The lawsuit said that the university ignored decades of complaints and deliberately concealed abuse. The University of California, Los Angeles began investigating Heaps in 2017, and he retired the next year after the school declined to renew his contract. Heaps also was criminally charged last year with 21 counts of sexual offences and has pleaded not guilty and has denied any wrongdoing. The youth trapped in a steep gorge in the southern Indian state of Kerala has now been rescued. Teams of the Indian Army had undertaken the rescue operation in the steep valleys of the Malampuzha, and according to the Indian Army, teams had been mobilized overnight and rescue operations were ongoing for nearly 48 hours. 2 army teams were deployed after the request from the state government. Meanwhile, in Brazil, Sao Paulo state authorities staged raids throughout the city, closing down and sanctioning gasoline station owners. The owners are now allegedly taking advantage of soaring gasoline prices driven by an almost 10% annual inflation rate. According to authorities, some gas stations are using the high gas prices to increase their income, damaging some car engines and outraging customers. In a press conference, the Sao Paulo governor, João Doria, said that 70% of gas stations had been inspected so far had shown some kind of irregularities. Thousands of protesters took to the streets of Buenos Aires against Argentina's debt deal with the International Monetary Fund. Demonstrators rallied outside Argentina's iconic government house to protest against President Alberto Fernandez's deal with the IMF on January 28th for a $44.5 billion standby agreement. Argentina and the IMF announced a breakthrough in the talks in late January to revamp a failed 2018 loan, which would see debt payments pushed back but involved pledges to meet certain economic targets agreed with the lender. Hundreds of people protesting against vaccine mandates amid the pandemic-related restrictions blocked the streets outside New Zealand's parliament for the second day in a row. A heavy police line was deployed in front of the parliament building to stop protesters from entering. 3 arrests have now been reported as protesters tried to break through. The protesters were largely unmasked, and that was a big concern, of course. They held placards and vowed to camp outside parliament until the COVID curbs were lifted. Protests, which may run for days now, are said to be inspired by the Freedom Convoy in Canada. During a news conference, New Zealand Prime Minister Jacinda Ardern said that those outside were not representative of the majority, adding that most people of New Zealand complied with COVID norms to keep one and another safe. Canadian Prime Minister Justin Trudeau was loudly heckled by the opposition MPs in Parliament as he defended the use of restrictions to fight the pandemic. Measures that, especially the measures taken by the government. Now, Canadian truckers have been taking to the streets of late in their vehicles to oppose the same measures. Meanwhile, the busiest land crossing from the US to Canada remains shut after Canadian truckers blocked lanes on Monday to protest their government's pandemic control measures. According to Windsor Police, while traffic in both directions was initially blocked, the US-bound lanes in particular have now been reopened.